This is part two of the talk on Soren Kirkegaard, the Danish philosopher and author who left a lot of marks in his time and the time after, up until today, still actual and very much relevant for us in our lives, since he's on this project of finding out who he is, overcoming doubt, and throwing himself off the cliff of the 70,000 feet of blackness and depths that he cannot really understand. And so now we are following him in the second part on his journey as a student and inspirations he got from there. We are in the years between 1830 and 1840, and we remember that he only lived until 1855. So in these short years from 1830, he had around 20-25 years to realize himself and the idea that he wanted to get through with in the world, and that's what he left of his many stories. So where to start? After finishing the academical exam, Akademisk Borgerbrev, a citizen letter in that time, that school were different from today. Not all people got the chance to study. Not all the people went to school at all, and not all people got the chance to study on a little higher level. And so to get to the highest level of education in society needed money, connections, and a kind of a occupation with these issues. You needed a brain for it, and you needed the conditions to be right in society. And he was one of these that came from a family that had money and had the ability to go to study all these things. So, well, he got there and he finished. And so after he finished what was called like a kind of high school level in modern terms, it was a kind of exam after the public basic school, where you go and educate yourself in Latin and a lot of other issues that also is only made for certain people with certain abilities in language and grammar and literature and ability to speak and these issues that really many can fall on of. And from there he went on in his life. He wanted to choose a direction, and so not strangely he chose to go into the study of theology. And theology is like the knowledge of God studied through the Christian literature, and to understand the idea of God and how the Christianity can fit in the life of people. This is an old, it's an old study issue that's not new at all in his time. And so in that year between 1831 and 32, he was very focused on understanding the theology as it was presented from the teachers, and just receiving more than giving. And at the same time, he was a bit bored on the way it was studied and thought and given to the students. So he was also out to seek philosophy, and went out to listen to lectures on philosophy in the town, because he wanted to combine that. And two big personalities affected him a lot in that time, that's maybe not known outside of Denmark and maybe not so important, but so I will mention them just shortly. Frederick Christian Sibbern, who died in 1872, and Paul Martin Müller, died 1838. The first one was, they were both like a philosophizing type of lecturers, and anchored in Christianity, of course, but well, his inspiration came in two folds from these two persons. Sibbern was like the intellectual who could talk a lot about big issues, and so he got specifically inspired by his talk about the human psychology. And remember, at that time there was no human psychology in the universities. There was no studies about it in a structured way. It was just called human psychology as just someone starting the trip to go out and find out what it's all about and dig into its depths. So at that level, he got very inspired by this author Sibbern, who talked about the human nature, the spiritual human nature, and was very occupied with the I the sickness of the I am this, I am that. And he saw that there were three types of this I. One is healthy and two are sick. And the first one is the one that takes the responsibility for that I. The second and third one is the one that wants things. Um, the one that wants things, and the one that wants to enjoy things. So that kind of look is, of course, theological and religious. It's from the religious perspective, looking at the human being as one who is looking at himself as responsible, living healthy according to the law and values of his time. And then this can go very wrong when you become very focused on just pleasure and sensuality, and at the same time, or otherwise, become very focused on having more and more and more. And this is what leads to adultery and greed. And these two are very negative aspects of the religious side of the Lutheran society and the Christian society, but also in other religions in the world, even though if I think there must have been parallels to other places in the world where some people like this Soren philosopher had given the same speech, but just within the limits of the other culture. So there is nothing new. Humans usually develop altogether like flowers in the field. It's just someone starting an idea and another taking it over and leaving it to the third. And so there, if we could go and look at that time and who had been speaking about these issues, we would find people in other cultures also having the same focus. But then for Soren Kirkegaard, who was from Copenhagen and never left his home, and he got it like served just in front of him. This was the first figure that inspired him to understand more about what is it that's going on inside us. Can we be more than one being, and can we change and all that? And so the second was Paul Martin Müller, who had that kind of literate and poetic gesture over him. He was a big, more like a farmer looking Dane. And so he didn't really get all that much publicum and publicity outside his small circle, because he was very focused on the one-to-one conversation. And that's what Soren Kierkegaard liked about him. He could see that opposite the first guy, Soren, who could give a big speech for an audience of many people, here this guy was not really breaking through on that level. But if you sat with him in one-on-one, he would give you part of himself, the depth and the understanding that you usually do not see. This is a part that also affected Soren Kierkegaard and got him on the road to start looking for what's called a personal truth in life. And this Müller had a lot of focus on that, the affectations that we can let if something is, but it's not. And we are between the lie and self-deceiving. So we can like have affectations for something or be in something that we are not truly aware of, that, or we are not truly part of. And so by becoming aware of that, you're deceiving yourself, but still keeping to it. That affected Soren Kierkegaard a lot. And so it was about to be very, very honest and true to yourself at the same time, and understanding the idea of what they called the changing affectations and true stable affectations, to stay that person you are, to build up that character that is worthy of you. And so he got that idea. It was like a seed that was planted in him, that he had to think over it, about it later in life. And so these two personalities affected him a lot at that time. And so when he went back later to write about the word angst or fear, on the phrases of angst, well, he thought of Paul Martin Müller, and he dedicated one of his best books to him, because it was maybe the seed that made him start looking into depth into that and understand more about it and give it over to us in today's world. One funny thing that Paul Martin Müller made Soren Kierkegaard aware of is that he told him, "You are so polemized that it is so terrible." It means that when you ever sit with him and discuss, he can make fun of things, he can joke of it, he can criticize it, he can find ways to look at it in a very different way, and it becomes irritating and terrible. It's not like he's just keeping track on the issue and the course of the debate and dialogue. This is also something Soren Kirkegaard, I think, remembered, and not only we know he remembered, but I think affected also his way of behaving and understanding himself in different ways. So he got a lot out of this Martin Müller from a philosophical, psychological, and personal aspect, not the least, and made him go and want to participate also in society. So this is the other gate. So this is the first gate where he was going to theology studies, listening to philosophers, or maybe just lectures on philosophy and life and politics, and then get affected by these two personalities and attachment to them. In the same way, he went out and started wanting to write something, and he wrote it under a pseudonym. He gave himself a false name, with other words, and wrote about defense for women's higher abilities. And it was published at that time in the Flying Post of Copenhagen. Well, that gave him a kind of sense of the writing, and that he wanted to go that way, and he understood that he had something to build on from that part. And it's sometimes ironic that he wrote about the woman in the beginning of his life, when he had very, very great difficulties in attaching to women, and had his difficulty attaching to this girl Regina later on from 1837 until 1841, where he on and off always thought about her and wanted to get to a marriage relation with her and to prove himself for her, but never got to. So to start about talking about this can seem ironically from perspective of normal people, but for a thinker, well, it's maybe the values that he is carrying and focusing on. From a psychological perspective, well, maybe he's just looking into what he's missing most, the woman in his life, and thereby giving her that romanticized and ideal picture in his mind. Not to forget that he was fond of his mother, even though he did not mention her a lot in his writings. He left a diary of about 22 volumes. That's the diary alone, and it was filled with a lot of writings, and each volume was published with about 400 pages in it. So it's a lot he left behind there. But the beautiful thing about his defense and talk about the woman's ability is because his time and the people affecting the ideas in his time were very much against that the woman should do more than sit and brood at home and at least not walk in leggings like the men are, and do the things that's fit for women, and that's very limited things. It can take a lot of time, but well, that's their role in life. And he had another idea on that, and was thinking back all the way to Adam and Eve, and how, well, she also was sitting listening to the snake's philosophical lecture, he said. It's like, well, she has been participating in this from the beginning, why shouldn't she be part of it all the way through? It's like that logic is lying behind this idea that he's giving us here. And so he stepped on the scene as someone who had ideas, who could defend them and talk about them, but still hidden behind pseudonyms and names that's not really his own. But he kept an eye on what to do and look for, and so he went to participate in what was called the Studentenverening. It's a kind of gathering for students that doesn't only sit and drink coffee and talk. It is the place where ideas from the world abroad got its roots. It's the place where new political and social ideas had their movement. So this place gathered some personalities from young people who really wanted the changes in the life around him. And basically, because of the way the kingdomship was being taken under the rule of the king for many hundred years, these people wanted this change that came from abroad, thinking in a new directions, giving the press more freedom, changing some of the power placement that has been in the king. And Soren Kirkegaard was part of that, but he was against it. He saw Denmark as a good and stable place with the king in it. So why do we need these so-called changes? They are like just changing one kind of soap with another. Well, what is that all for? Is it just to have something to fight for and that has no meaning and depth in it? And so it was in the time of Frederick VI, and that king tried to get hold on like the free speech in his society, and he tried to like make it under control so people could have some kind of free speech, but no satirics and no harming and disrespectable way of writing and expressing. And this is what these students wanted to go against. And for Soren Kierkegaard, well, it wasn't necessary as long as it was reforms from the king and given to the people. Well, why not accept the limits and the censorship of that press, so we could live in more harmonic ways than go about and just have all these talks that's not really necessary. This is my rephrasing of the idea. And so he had a small quarrel with the leader of the Studentenverening in 1835, in the November of that year, where he was saying, well, okay, your idea seems bright, but really there is nothing new in it, and it's like just a new piece of soap, leaving out the old piece of soap, but it's still soap. There is nothing new. So he stood on the side of the king, and he stood on the side of the establishment that was at that time, and that didn't fell well, neither with the people or that movement at that time called the liberal movements for the rights of the peasants and rights of the, not the proletariat, it wasn't in Denmark, but it was kind of the people who didn't have a lot to say and didn't have a lot of anybody to defend them and speak on their behalf. It was just a one-sided rule that could take people in any direction. So it's the growing ideas of democracy that was really picking the ideas of society and the people in society. And he had this opinion that, well, in the 1830s, well, it's maybe not all that good as it looks on the surface. And so this is one of the things that some will look back and look at Soren Kierkegaard, that he didn't really go wholeheartedly in for democracy. And well, in my opinion, it's always the philosophers who wins, even though we have to go through 100, 200, 300 years of changes before we can see that, because he can see through with the wisdom a lot of times that's maybe further away than the short-sightedness that many people can walk with. It's like they want a short victory, but long-term defeat. And so it's a long talk to talk about democracy and for or against it, and the people's free opinion. Today we take it as granted, as free rights, that everyone can publish what he wants and talk and go about his group or people that he likes to be with. But it's not at that time something that is so obvious. And why is it needed at all? And even our time, we can discuss this, and where does that lead us, and how much true freedom of expression do we really have? So it's a long talk, actually, but well, he was against, and these people were for, and so it came to a break in 1939, where he couldn't see himself on that list of these people that really had these ideas for change. But among them were the stifter and the founder of the Liberal Party, that had a great influence to play in the century to come after, Ole Lehmann and the people around him there, because the Liberal Party gained a lot of support and also forced the king and the ruling class of the conservatives to give more and more rights to these people who are left outside, and give more and more rights to the press to say what it wanted to say critically, without censorship and without any repercussions. And so we have this change going on in Denmark, as it was in Europe as a whole, from 1830s to 1850s was the time of the French Revolution, and was the time of people calling for the fall of the kings. So all the monarchs in Europe were like somehow anxious that this is something that's gonna roll like dominoes. And of course, he was just a little young man in Copenhagen looking at this like everybody else, and chose the side of the king as the stable and most secure common form. And well, if the king has made reforms to give the people free speech, that should be what they accepted, and no need to change the soap once more. Now to the more important side of his personal journey. It's in the same time there, 1834, 35, he started having big doubts about himself, his life, his Christianity, his belief system, everything that he is part of. And he started like getting into a kind of a mood of being in a kind of inner unrest. And he didn't really understand what's going on with him. And we can see that from his diary. So he got these waves of doubt and uncertainty and insecurity, walking around there in himself, not really understanding what is it that's up in him. So he does not really truly feel that he is that old believer in that Orthodox Christianity, and he's not really that person that feels at home in it anymore. And he wanted to look into that and had a lot of trouble. And so this comes to life in one of his most concentrated letters from June 1835 to Peter Lund. He was a zoologist and was part of the family. His brothers had married with his sisters, and so he had a good relationship to him. And he wrote to him about his trips to Brazil at that time, where he wanted to explore. And so he wrote to him a letter that still resounds as one of the central elements that made his project come to life. It is where he started looking into himself and his life. Really, it's like you can say it's a summary, a synopsis of everything he wanted to go through in all these books. Of course, not everything is in there, but we can see the outlines already from the way he writes. Let's follow a little bit of the letter. He says to him how excited he is to talk to him, and his travels in Brazil and the descriptions of it. And then he tells him that, well, I have a problem finding that earth and that ground where I really belong, and that doesn't seem easy to find at all. And that it seems strange. He's never left Copenhagen, and he's in his environment. Everybody around him knows him, and he has just finished the higher exam, and he's part of the Studenterforening, and he's active in society. His family is wealthy enough, and so what is it? Where is that ground that he lost? He wasn't a fugitive, but it's like he was a fugitive inside himself. He could not really find his own feet. Something is happening inside him that made everything change. Nothing made sense anymore as it did in the old times or before that. And so he circles around Faust, that figure from Goethe, the big German writer and author of that big and beautiful epic poem about that guy who wanted to get all the knowledge, and so in the end, like got self-destructive. And had to make this deal with Mephistopheles, what is he called? Mephistopheles, the devil in other ways. And so he had to give part up of himself and thereby lose to gain all that knowledge that he wanted. And so he starts talking to his friend there in this letter, saying, well, we want to work with our abilities in the world, and we want to go in a certain direction that is possible for the person and his individuality. But which direction is that? That's the big question I'm standing with. I am like Hercules, but I do not have the road to show me. Here is many roads in front of me, and that's much harder than it is just choosing between two roads or knowing the right one. Which one is the right one? And that's the unhappiness in my existence. I interest myself for everything, but really not really in anything. So he was like lost in between all that, and that's what makes him so modern. We can recognize that at once. And he says further on, my interests are not just one and put into hierarchy of interests. It is something that goes alongside each other. I want a lot of things at the same time. And then he writes about what he thinks about the nature sciences that already had a hold on people in that time, and was the new way of being modern and thinking. It is going with the new sciences and not staying in the old books, looking in the old Bible and its way of interpreting life and nature. We have to go out and experiment ourselves and find out with our own eyes and senses what is to be relied on as science, what is not. So it was a great division that was there already in that time and before his time even, between where people should turn to, and many people were reactionary and said, science, that's not, the only real science is to find in the Holy Book and the Bible, and the truth is only there, and this science is just a kind of deceiving element. And the people who said, well, science is just a way of exploring life and society and exploring how things are going about. So he talks to his friend about this, that these nature sciences, in opposition to theology, he say, I am very fond of them, excited about them, but I do not want to make them my focus, my main focus. I'm not sure about this, and he's not sure about the other side of it either, the theology, the study of understanding God and Christianity. He said, well, this orthodoxy that I'm grown up in, as you know, is part of me, but when I start thinking, I can see this great colossus. It's like a big statue inside his mind. It is tippling over. So everything about theology is suddenly tipping over for him. And he says, for me, it looks like these theologians in their own world is like the people going on the beach road on Sunday afternoon. Well, that's the time where everybody goes to the zoo and have a walk in the park. And they go there to the beach road, shouting and screaming and driving their horses to death, toppling things, running over them, running over each other. And then when they reach that hill they are going to, they look at each other, all dirty and tired with no breath left, and look at each other up there on the hill and goes back home. So he says there's nothing about it. They keep quarreling about the same thing. They're all going to that hill, and it's a very beautiful picture, showing that how he suddenly could see the whole theology in that sense of some kind of, it doesn't make sense anymore. It's like a closed circle that keeps repeating itself, and there is nothing more to get out of it. It has established and it has talked everything through and over. So there was nothing for him to go for. And the nature sciences, well, he didn't really find his way through it, even though he had the inspirations from several persons like this Peter Wilhelm Lund, the zoologist. And at that time, being a zoologist was something important and new. We were following in the steps of Darwin and people who are exploring nature on its own premises. So he couldn't really find himself between that theological world and that rationalistic way of explaining everything. And so he stood there wanting really to get a way out and to find a way out of that misery that had hit him. In that same time, in that period, he had already lost his mom. He lost her in July 1834. And one can ask a big question why he never talks really about her in his diaries in detail. And he also lost his sister, both sisters, and his brother. So from 1832, 33, 34, he's lost 4 of his members of the family. 3 of them were the women. And so in 1835, he had his old father and his brother, Peter Christian. And the others had already died earlier, as we said, the other 2. So out of 8 members, he had only 2, and that old man that he had this ambivalent relation to, as we talked on in the first part. And all at once, and in the same time, he was also hit by everything that was going on around him in society. the search for knowledge through the nature sciences, and the opposition to theology, and the doubt about and the trust in the true Christianity. Well, where is he to turn to, and how is it for him to find his true calling? This is what he really wanted. That's why he wrote in that book later, in his diary from August 1st, 1835. What really is lacking for me is to get clear with myself what I should do. And he marks that, what I should do. Not what I should realize, but what is mine to follow. It's about finding the truth that is the truth for me, to find the idea for which I would live and die for. To find the idea for which I would live and die for. This is really now the project that he is on and out to find, between the many roads he has to choose in front of him, and the many doubts and the situation in that so-called modern time of theirs. Well, he's welcome to come into our worlds today, and the total chaotic choices that we people can stand in front of, trying to find our feet among not only main religions, but a lot of subways under these religions, and not only one part of main natural science, but a lot of subways under these natural sciences. Not only one university, but a lot of subways beneath these universities, a lot of cultures, a lot of things that we cannot see, that's controlled by this and that, and affected by money, affected by interests, and small closed groups you cannot get into, a media that's a jungle, giving you a stream of information you cannot really get your head around. So what would he have said? But the good thing is, going back to the very beginning of that time, looking back and seeing, wow, if he had it that way, I better understand how I could have it and others could have it in my time as well. And so this is what he really wanted. He wanted to find the idea for which he would live and die for. What he didn't know is that later on he would have another guy called Nietzsche from Germany saying that, well, if you find the truth that you are willing to live and die for, the how becomes you can carry anyhow if you know why. So you can almost carry any kind of how if you can realize why. So if you know why you are living for something, what you want to do, why you're doing it, you can accept any kind of how almost. It's a kind of fanaticism in finding your true calling in life and fighting for it, no matter how and in which way. Well, it's a bit dramatized here because he never gets into neither wars or prison or these extreme things that has happened to many other people, carrying their ideas and thoughts with them and living and dying for them. But this is typically the Danish situation, dramatizing a lot of things outside that's not really in the reality inside that little country. And so even when they look back at the times of the kings in Denmark, with some exceptions, there have been a lot of what can you say, milder climate between the kings and the population. There has been a kind of understanding somewhere that sometimes got totally lost in some of the other countries where people were massacred and put down in big numbers. And so we have this little cozy country that really didn't experience all that directly, even though it wanted to be that on the dramatic scene. So it's many times also a kind of drama inside the heads more than it is a drama in reality. And that's my experience with Denmark, really confirms this. That it's really, he want to find what you want to live and die for, all right, but what kind of trials are you going through to get there? Well, it's only some kind of psychological, ironic things he would get made laughed of in the newspapers and so on, and it was hard enough. So, but when you measure it with people who are really putting their heads on the line, it's nothing. That's what I'm trying to say. It's not that what he's doing is not important. It's just if you measure it with other places, it will become less dangerous in its nature. And so back to his story, he's in Gililaya that summer, and it's that summer that actually forms that project. The Gililaya is in the north of Schilland, a beautiful area that goes all the way up through the northeast, northwest coast. And in that summer of August 1835, where he took the carriage, it could take many days to reach there, he wrote a lot on the way and during his stay there. And some of his thoughts, as we said earlier, were the outlines of what he wanted to do. He had this letter from earlier, and then he had in his diaries, well, I want to find what's my true calling here. And he says, well, what is it the use that I have the truth in standing in front of me, cold and naked, and whatever I realize it or not, it has no real effect on me other than giving me the chills. I cannot give myself up to it as trustworthy as I can. So what the use is of that? It's like a person who is renting a place and having his things in it, but haven't found the loved one to share it with him. So it's like he's losing part of himself if he accepts the truth around him while his inner self is rejecting it or is standing in doubt, not really passionate about that cold and naked truth as he can see it in front of him, whatever that is. So he must let this become alive in him. And this is what he now realizes, that this is the main case for him. How to make this come alive, this inner sense of passion, feeling that this is what he really wants from inside him. We can already see the subjectivity here, the I that's screaming for its uniqueness and its position inside him. And so he says in this same period and from the same trip to Gililaya, where he had the nature around him, he had the treetops, and he had the beautiful romantic area. And in that period, it was very important to have these romantic places, romanticized places as well in nature, because it meant to give inspiration to people. It helped free out the ideas and the thoughts that had really been in a kind of small prison inside the mind and inside the heart by walking around in the same culture and routine all day. So leaving it all, going another place while you're thinking. And that's the problem with tourism today. They go all other places, but they're not thinking alongside the trips. It's just, oh yeah, that's beautiful. Let's take 120 pictures of this and that. But they're not really stopping up to look at the story, not all at least. Stopping up behind the stories, the culture, what happened here. How does that affect me? What can I take back with me? This is another kind of cultural tourism that is needed out there. And so he says, I am like the soul that is thirsting, like being in Africa's Sahara, thirsting for water. And so he starts his journey, and I will stop here and maybe go on from the next time talking about how he throw himself into hedony and trying all the pleasures and trying to get in contact with the other sex and the girls and the things he talks about there. And so the real turning point that makes him really find his calling in that period between 35 and 37.